Seawolves, and welcome back to this edition of Eyewitness News. I'm Ava Shea.
And I'm Jake Aricchio. Today marks 2 years since Hamas attacked southern Israel, killing more than 1,200 people and taking more than 250 hostages. Thousands of Israelis have gathered in memorial sites today, including the Nova Music Festival, where almost 400 people have died and 48 of those hostages still remain in Gaza. Just hours after Hamas's initial attack, Israel would launch its counterattack, marking the beginning of the current Israel-Hamas war. Israeli military attacks since have killed more than 66,000 Palestinians and destroyed much of the Gaza Strip. Today, delegations from Israel and Hamas are in Egypt to try and negotiate a ceasefire deal. A critical 20-point deal proposed by the United States is on the table. Eyewitness News correspondent Miles Reese has been following the story and is joining us now for more. Miles, good evening.
Good evening, Jake. And yes, we have a lot of updates coming out of this conflict. And for right now, all eyes are on Hamas, as they have previously stated that they'd be releasing all of the Israeli hostages. Now, things are underway, and they're working with the United States and Israel to make this a possibility. But one question remains: how is this exactly going to work, and will both sides hold up on their deals of the bargain? Now, as we speak right now, there isn't any word on how or when these hostages will be released, but being that Hamas is willing to seize power in Gaza City, a possible ceasefire could be on the horizon.
So Miles, you mentioned a possible ceasefire. Could this move lead to a lasting end to the conflict, or is it likely just a temporary step?
Right now, it could be a lasting, have a lasting impact, because there is international pressure to release these hostages. Hostage families have even had talks with President Trump, saying that they wanted to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize and things like that, and just anything really to release these hostages. And foreign governments have also expressed their concerns, and they really want to get the ball rolling on the end of this conflict.
Yeah, so could we see Israel retreat from Gaza, paving the way for a broader peace agreement?
This could be a possibility. President Trump has taken to Truth Social and X, saying that he wants Benjamin Netanyahu to pull back forces that are now firing at Gaza. So it seems that the president and the administration wants to move things forward and finally bring an end to this war.
Thank you, Miles, for these updates. We'll continue following this story as it develops. And now, for our very own Sky Crabtree sat down with Emmy-winning filmmaker Robin Barnwell to talk about his film, A Year of War, Israelis and Palestinians. Let's hear what he has to say.
Okay, Robin, so you produced this award-winning documentary about the plight between Israelis and Palestinians around a year ago now. Tell me what the process was like for choosing that conflict to really make that in-depth documentary about.
Well, I was making another film in Ukraine when October the 7th, 2 years ago today, happened, and actually I'd been having dinner the night before with Jeremy Bowen, the Middle East correspondent for the BBC, and he dashed off from Kyiv, and he went off and then went over to try to get to Israel, and I was finishing the film, and so but in Ukraine, it was only later that year that I managed to sort of lock on to making a film about Israel and Gaza. And obviously the focus of the film initially had been on the October the 7th attacks. But by the time I got to Tel Aviv, obviously the focus was then shifting to the conflict in Gaza and the destruction and the battles and the bombings there and the suffering of Gazans, as well as obviously the legacy of Israelis and the hostage crisis, which was still ongoing. So we went from looking at a focus on October the 7th and what had happened to Israelis, which was a defining moment in Israel, bringing up lots of terrible memories of the Holocaust and previous sort of Jewish history. And then realizing that obviously it wasn't just going to be about October the 7th, we needed to obviously broaden the film out. And at that particular point, I think we thought, right, what we wanted to do was actually sort of show how the conflict was impacting what Israelis and Palestinians thought about each other, and how the war was impacting this view of each other and their ability, perhaps in the longer term, to ever reconcile. I've worked in the region for, I've been there on and off making films, and I had never seen the two people's communities so psychologically far apart from each other, which was obviously deeply shocking, and the deeply shocking events of October the 7th, obviously, and also the deeply shocking events that sort of in Gaza. And as the sort of casualty rate was rising in Gaza, we were looking to find Gazans, who sympathetic characters who were not political as such. You can't take the politics obviously entirely out of this, but we wanted to sort of humanise the victims on both sides. That was the kind of one of the key things that we wanted to do. We felt there'd been a lot of sort of dehumanisation, but what was critical for us was actually to sort of essentially find a series of Israelis who had been impacted by the events of October the 7th and Palestinians who'd been impacted by the war in Gaza, and to actually sort of look at their, essentially, look at them as human beings and what they had suffered. And essentially the film was trying to sort of essentially say, to show people that even if you didn't agree with the views expressed, it was essentially trying to show the world that, just give people a better understanding of events. It's a minefield of a subject to cover, and it's become more difficult, obviously, over time to cover it because of the sort of the extent of the violence. But that was the kind of the sort of driving force behind the documentary, the driving idea.
Excellent.
And now for our White House correspondent, Nikita Cook.
President Trump threatens to enact the Insurrection Act that grants power to the president to deploy federal armed forces to cities embroiled in civil unrest if the U.S. courts continue to block his deployment attempts. If invoked, it would be the first time in over 30 years the Insurrection Act has been used. Recently, a federal judge blocked Trump's attempts to send the National Guard to Portland for a second time. For months, President Trump has been attempting to send the National Guard to the Democratic-run cities that have been experiencing protests against ICE raids. Both D.C. and L.A. have already had troops present since this summer, and now Chicago could be next to join the list. On Monday, the Trump administration authorized the deployment of hundreds of National Guard troops from Texas into Chicago. This comes after Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson declared ICE-free zones in the city, sparking the swift reaction from the White House.
Our school parking lots are not for ICE to load their weapons. They are for Chicagoans who drop their kids off to learn. Our libraries are not for ICE to prepare for a raid. They're for Chicagoans to read and relax. Our parks are not for ICE to set up checkpoints. They are for Chicagoans to play and enjoy.
Both Illinois and Chicago filed suit against the Trump administration, calling it a violation of the constitutional limits on presidential power. However, hundreds of troops were sent out that evening and appear to have arrived in Illinois last night, as shown in a tweet by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. The Trump administration insists these troops are necessary to reduce crime, but the mayor has said this will only create more violence. And the government shutdown is entering its second week. The government shutdown could enter a second week if a deal isn't made tonight, and the White House has indicated that furloughed federal employees will not be entitled to back pay. This is a reversal of a previous decision made by the Trump administration during the last government shutdown that compensated employees for 35 days without work. This is increasing pressure on the Congress to come to a deal.
Really depends on who you're talking about, but for the most part, we're going to take care of our people. There are some people that really don't deserve to be taken care of, and we'll take care of them in a different way.
President Trump has blamed Democrats, calling on lawmakers to accept the Republican deal. Bills by both Republicans and Democrats have failed to pass in the Senate, and federal agencies have been left without funding in the meantime. Democrats have rejected deals that include funding for health care, while Republicans have rejected deals that include it. Currently, there are no signs that an agreement will be reached today, and airports, schools, and other places that rely on federal funding will likely continue to experience disruption until a funding deal is reached in the Senate.
Bill Nye, the science guy. Yes, the man who taught you about the scientific method. He's now on the steps of Capitol Hill, fighting for the genre he spent decades teaching. The classroom favorite, along with more than 300 science advocates, stood on Capitol Hill, urging Congress to save NASA from President Trump's proposed 24% cut to its funding as part of his skinny budget for next year. The biggest blow from these cuts would be to NASA's Science Research Department, which would face a nearly 50% decrease, a level that scientists warned that could have tremendous consequences. Not only would it be, quote, an extinction-level event for space exploration, but U.S. economic growth and national security could also be negatively affected.
This is not a luxury. It is a responsibility. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the U.S. Constitution recommends to Congress that they promote the progress of science and useful arts. It's in the Constitution.
The group is urging Congress to go beyond simply pushing back against the proposed cuts and to go as far as enacting laws that will prevent science budgets from being cut in the future.
The Supreme Court heard arguments today on a Colorado law banning so-called conversion therapy for minors. After initial arguments, the justices appeared poised to rule against the ban. Conversion therapy involves attempts to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. It is currently banned in 23 states and Washington, D.C. The court has rejected similar challenges before, but this case comes amid growing political divides of the LGBTQ rights. Opponents of the law say it violates freedom of speech, but Colorado says it is regulating professional conduct, not speech, citing major medical groups that have condemned conversion therapy as ineffective and harmful. The court's decision is expected by June. The controversial law from Nassau County that bars trans women from competing in women's sports is still in effect. A New York judge ruled on Monday that the law is designated to, quote, protect women and girls, and that trans women can still play in co-ed sports leagues at the county's facilities. Republican Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman first imposed a ban through an executive order last year, which was struck down in a lawsuit from the New York Civil Liberties Union. In 2024, New York Attorney General Letitia James, along with the New York Civil Liberties Union, filed separate lawsuits, arguing that it violated the state's human rights and civil rights laws. In a statement responding to the ruling on Monday, Union staff attorney Gabriela Larios said, quote, today's decision sends a chilling message that trans people don't belong in Nassau County, and vowed to, quote, challenge the decision to ensure trans girls and women can play sports freely just like everyone else.
Well, there are a couple tropical storms making noise on the East Coast. Damatia Katsaros is standing by with the latest on Hurricanes Imelda and Humberto.
Hey Stony Brook, we are a few days into October and the temperatures are gradually starting to cool down here in New York, but the same cannot be said about the Atlantic Ocean or the Gulf. As we saw last week, Hurricane Imelda and Hurricane Humberto did not make landfall with the United States as they pulled each other out to sea as a result of the Fujiwara effect, which happens when there are two low-pressure systems almost orbiting each other, kind of doing a tropical tango. Satellite imagery showed the hurricanes dancing in the Atlantic Ocean around each other, which significantly altered their paths and resulted in them pulling each other out to sea. This was very fortunate for the United States, as Humberto's presence ultimately saved the Carolinas and Georgia and even parts of Florida from major flooding and hurricane-force winds. We are not out of the woods just yet, as hurricane season doesn't end until around November 30th for America. That being said, there is something brewing once again in the Atlantic Ocean, on track to form by the Lesser Antilles. Sea surface temperatures are still relatively warm and the environment is optimal for some sort of tropical activity. So let's take a look here at the National Hurricane Center's Atlantic 7-day tropical weather outlook. We can see disturbance 1 here in the Atlantic, and it's projected to develop as it tracks closer to the Lesser Antilles. It has a 70% chance of development within the next 7 days. So let's take a little bit of an even closer look of what we're dealing with right now. Here we have an infrared loop where we see the disorganized nature of this storm. There are definitely some clouds, some convection happening, but it is so disorganized and there's nothing uniform happening. It is expected to develop later this week as it's moving rather quickly into an optimal area for conditions for tropical formation. This is the only disturbance that we are looking at. There's nothing else at the moment that's really sticking out or any cause for concern. That being said, we've still got a lot of October and November to stay weather aware, especially since sea surface temperatures in the Gulf are also pretty warm, which provides that energy for these tropical storms or potentially something stronger to develop. We'll be sure to keep an eye out for any updates on this disturbance or anywhere else in the Gulf, the East Coast, or the Atlantic for that matter. That's all from me. Back to you at the news desk.
And now for the latest in entertainment, let's hear from Tommy Pardo.
Thank you, Ava. Welcome to the Media Minute, where you get the latest in entertainment and pop culture. I'm Thomas Pardo. Pop-punk giant Yellowcard is coming out with their first album in 9 years. Better Days, the band's 11th studio album, is set to be released this Friday. So far, the songs from the album that have been released are the title track, Better Days, Honestly I, Take What You Want, and Bedroom Posters. In 2017, the band broke up due to factors like the declining ticket sales, internal struggle, and logistical challenges. Yellowcard reformed in 2022 and have not looked back since. In 2024, Yellowcard went on the road to support Third Eye Blind's Summer Gods Tour, playing hit singles like Ocean Avenue and Only One. Currently, they are embarking on the co-headline Maximum Fun Tour with fellow Florida-based band A Day to Remember. Better Days will be available on all streaming platforms and in music stores, so make sure to check it out. And guess what, Bruce Springsteen fans? We're getting another movie with rock legend. But instead of a documentary like his past releases, we're getting a biopic. The film titled Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere is to release on October 24th and will focus on Springsteen's recording sessions of his 1982 album called Nebraska. The movie follows Springsteen, played by the Bear actor Jeremy Allen White, and we'll see fellow actors Jeremy Strong and Paul Walter Hauser make an appearance as Springsteen's manager and recording engineer, respectively. Tickets are out now, so get them while you can. And comic fans, we'll see you this week in Manhattan for this year's New York Comic Con. Taking place this Thursday to Sunday, fans will get to roam the halls of the Javits Center and be immersed in all things pop culture. Attendees can get to experience fun activities like photo ops and meet and greets with their favorite comic writers and actors. And, as always, many celebrities, some of them being named guests of honor, appear at this wide-ranging convention. This year will honor celebrities like Jurassic World actress Bryce Dallas Howard and Game of Thrones creator George R.R. Martin. I am very excited for this year's Comic-Con since I am going to be there for the second consecutive year. It is sure to be an exciting, jam-packed weekend. That's a wrap for your Media Minute. Back to you.
Thanks, Tom. We now transition to Christopher Schultz and Nikola Neskovich for the latest in sports.
Thank you, Jake and Ava. Chris, I must say that there was a lot happening in the world of sports this weekend.
Yeah, we're still in the midst of both the football season and the MLB postseason. But first, let's talk about football. Nicola, do you remember former Jets quarterback Mark Sanchez?
I do, and I heard that he's in a pretty bad situation right now.
He sure is. He is now facing a felony battery charge from an altercation Saturday morning at a hotel that left a truck driver with a laceration on the left side of his face and Sanchez with multiple stab wounds. Sanchez and the truck driver, identified as 69-year-old Perry Toll, allegedly engaged in the altercation after an argument over a parking space. Both men were hospitalized for their injuries, but are in stable condition, luckily. If convicted, Sanchez faces 1 to 6 years in prison.
Yeah, we obviously hope that everybody has a speedy recovery. In other on-the-pitch news, football news, both New York teams lost on Sunday. The Giants lost by a score of 26-14 to the New Orleans Saints, and the Jets lost to the Dallas Cowboys 37-22. Both teams are now a combined record of 1-9 for the season.
In other news, the Yankees find themselves in a 2-0 hole in their ALDS matchup against the Toronto Blue Jays. The Bronx Bombers were blown out by Toronto by scores of 10-1 and 13-7 over the weekend. Tonight they play at 8 p.m. Eastern in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, and as a city boy myself, I will definitely be rooting for them too. All right, that's it for sports. I'm Nikola Knežević.
And I'm Christopher Schultz. Back to the desk.
Well, I hope the good weather holds up this week. Now let's find out as JC Bejith is standing by with our 7-day forecast.
Thanks, guys. I'm student meteorologist JC Bejith. We've almost made it into fall break, and while midterms and projects might be putting you in a cloudy mood, hopefully this week's weather will brighten your day. Here's what you can expect in your 7-day forecast. After an initially sunny start to our week, today we can expect wet conditions as a cold front passes across Long Island. The rain is expected to continue throughout the day, clearing up into partly cloudy conditions on Thursday morning. The high temperature at 70 degrees and low at 58 degrees. Tomorrow, the clouds will roll away, revealing sunny conditions. However, we will see those high temperatures start to drop, with the high at only 61 degrees and the early morning low at 48. On Friday, a couple clouds will move in for mostly sunny skies, leaving us with conditions that will continue into the weekend. The high on Friday near 65 and the early morning low keeping at around 48. Weekend highs in the high 60s with lows dropping into the high 40s. As you head into your fall break, there is a chance of some scattered rain on Monday night into Tuesday afternoon. But otherwise, expect mostly sunny skies, high temperatures in the high 60s, and nocturnal lows in the mid 50s. Hang in there, Seawolves. back to you at the desk.
Thank you, JC. Well, that'll be all for this edition of Eyewitness News. I'm Jake Riccio.
And I'm Ava Shea. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.